The Roman emperor who waged war against the ocean. It's the year 40 AD on the northern shores of Gaul. The Roman army is standing in full battle formation, their polished armor glinting under a gray sky. Before them rides their commander, the most powerful man in the world, the Emperor Caligula. Then he gives a sudden, shocking command. The legions are to attack. Their enemy? The ocean itself. He then orders his men to fill their helmets with seashells, the spoils of the sea, he calls them, plunder from his divine victory over the god Neptune. That one story has come to define Caligula's entire reign. For 2,000 years, it's been held up as the ultimate proof of the mad emperor. But what if it's a lie? What if that entire unhinged scene, from the battle with the waves to the collecting of shells, was a brilliant piece of political propaganda, twisted to destroy a man's legacy? History has left us a portrait of Caligula as the classic mad tyrant. But when we peel back the layers of myth, the man underneath is far more complex. So, was Caligula truly insane? Or was he the victim of one of history's most successful and longest-running smear campaigns? To find the answer, we have to look past the caricature and find the man behind the monster. To understand the monster, you first have to meet the man Rome absolutely adored. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, he was the son of Germanicus, one of Rome's most beloved generals. As a toddler in his father's military camps in Germania, the soldiers gave him an affectionate nickname, Caligula, or Little Boot, after the miniature army sandals he wore. He was the army's darling, the son of a national hero. When he came to power in 37 AD, at just 24 years old, Rome celebrated. After the gloomy and paranoid final years of his predecessor, Tiberius, Caligula felt like a ray of sunshine. And for the first few months, his reign was everything the people had hoped for. He freed political prisoners, got rid of unfair taxes, and threw lavish public games that made him a star with the masses. He seemed to have it all: his father's military clout, his great-grandfather Augustus's political legitimacy, and the vibrant energy of youth. For a brief moment, it looked like a new golden age was finally here. But the honeymoon didn't last. Just 7 months into his reign, in the autumn of 37 AD, Caligula fell gravely ill. Ancient sources are vague on the details, but they all agree on one thing. When he recovered, he was a changed man. The charming, generous young emperor was gone. In his place was someone they described as cruel, paranoid, and dangerously extravagant. This is when the really wild stories start to surface. Tales of him demanding to be worshipped as a living god, of incest with his sisters, and, most famously, of his plan to make his favorite horse, Incitatus, a consul. History paints this as a sudden descent into madness. But there's another possibility. Caligula's attempts to rule as an absolute monarch, more like a Hellenistic king than a traditional Roman emperor, deeply offended the old guard in the Roman Senate. These senators, the very men who would later write the history of his reign, felt their power and traditions slipping away. And they wouldn't forget it. The question is, were the stories that followed a true sign of his mental state, or were they weapons used by a political class fighting to get back on top? Which brings us back to that beach in 40 AD. To get what happened, you have to understand the pressure Caligula was under. A Roman emperor's authority rested on many things, but nothing was more important than military glory. His father was a celebrated war hero. His great-grandfather, Augustus, had expanded the empire's borders. Caligula, on the other hand, had no major military victories to his name. An invasion of Britain, a mysterious, resource-rich island that had even given Julius Caesar trouble, was the perfect chance to cement his legacy. Archaeological evidence, like the remains of forts and a lighthouse, suggests that preparations for an invasion were well underway. Caligula had gathered a massive army on the shores of the English Channel, but for reasons we still debate, the invasion never happened. Some historians suggest the troops were on the verge of mutiny, terrified of crossing the treacherous ocean. Whatever the reason, Caligula was facing a political disaster. To go back to Rome empty-handed, after such a huge and expensive mobilization, was unthinkable. It would make him look weak, a fatal blow to his authority. He needed a victory, and he needed one now. This is where the ancient historian Suetonius gives us his famous account. Writing about 80 years after the event, he paints a ridiculous picture. He claims that Caligula drew up his battle lines on the shore, arranged his artillery, and with no one having any clue what he was planning, he suddenly ordered his men to attack the sea. Then came the final absurd act. He commanded the soldiers to gather seashells, to fill their helmets and tunics with them. These shells, he declared, were the spoils from the ocean due to the Capitol and Palatine. He had conquered Neptune, god of the sea, and this was his plunder. He even promised his men a bonus of 100 denarii each, telling them, "Go your ways and be merry, for now you are rich." It's a story so perfectly insane, it has defined Caligula's reputation for 2 millennia. But it's also a story that comes from some very biased sources. The reliability of the ancient historians who wrote about Caligula is a huge problem. Our main source for the seashell story is Suetonius, a biographer who loved juicy gossip as much as he loved hard facts. His accounts, and those of Cassius Dio, were written long after Caligula's death and leaned heavily on sources who hated the emperor. These writers were from the senatorial class, the exact group Caligula had spent his reign humiliating. After Caligula was brutally assassinated in 41 AD, his enemies had to justify it. The emperor had been popular with the people and the army, so his murder could have easily backfired. What followed was a classic case of damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. His statues were torn down, his name was scrubbed from public records, and a story was built to paint him not as the victim of a political hit, but as a monster who had to be put down for the good of Rome. The story of a war on the sea fits that narrative perfectly. It's almost too perfect. Unraveling historical propaganda like this is what makes studying the past so compelling. It's about looking beyond the accepted narrative and finding a more complex truth. If you enjoy these kinds of deep dives, you might want to check out the streaming service History Hit. It's packed with documentaries from experts like Mary Beard and Dan Snow who challenge our perceptions of figures like Caligula, and it's a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to go beyond the headlines of history. So, if Caligula didn't literally declare war on the ocean, what actually happened on that beach? Modern historians have a few compelling theories that reframe the event not as madness, but as shrewd, if cynical, political theater. One popular theory comes down to a simple mistranslation. The Latin word Suetonius uses for shells is conchae. While it can mean seashells, it might also have been military slang for something else entirely. Some suggest it referred to sappers' tents, also known as musculi, or even small boats used by local Britons. In order to pack up the tents or gather the enemy boats is a lot more logical than collecting shells. The story could be a deliberate or even accidental misreading of a mundane military command. Another powerful explanation is the punishment theory. If the legions really did refuse to invade Britain, Caligula would have had a mutiny on his hands. Instead of resorting to decimation, the traditional bloody punishment of executing every 10th man, what could be more humiliating for a proud Roman soldier than being ordered to do the childish task of collecting seashells? In this light, the order becomes a calculated act of psychological punishment. It was a symbolic gesture, telling them that if they refused to fight for real treasure, the only spoils they deserved were worthless shells. So, did Caligula wage war on the ocean? The literal story is highly unlikely. What we know is probably a fabrication, a mistranslation, or a brilliant piece of political spin by a desperate emperor that was later twisted by his enemies into a tale of insanity. The historical Caligula was no saint. Even accounting for bias, the sources paint a picture of a cruel, arrogant, and deeply insecure young man, warped by a traumatic childhood and corrupted by absolute power. But he probably wasn't mad. He was a sharp political operator who understood the power of spectacle. The incident on the beach was likely a pragmatic solution to a military and political crisis, a way to declare some kind of victory in the face of failure. It was a performance for an audience back in Rome. The tragedy for Caligula is that the story was retold by his enemies, who recast him from a cunning politician into a lunatic. It's a powerful reminder that history is rarely a simple account of what happened. More often than not, it's the story that the victors choose to tell.